Right. That was an absolute headache. Trying to sort that out. But we'll just get the chat up on here. Just while we're waiting for people to join. Right, so what I'm going to be doing is a water change on this system tonight, and there's a couple of reasons why I want to get it done. So first one is, I mean, the tank needs a clean anyway, but someone's actually coming to film this fish room on the Sunday, so I want to try and get this tank nice and clean so that it's not taking all my day up tomorrow and it's ready for when my mate comes round and films it. So the Cichlid Whisperer, mentioned him in one of my previous videos. He's coming to film a little bit of footage on this tank and this room, some of the tanks downstairs as well. So he's just starting to get into the world of YouTube, set up a little studio at home. He's got tanks he can film and stuff, but you know, he wanted to come and film this one and make it one of his first videos on the channel. So want to make sure that it's nice and clean for him. And yeah, that's what we're going to be doing tonight. So I've got my water change pump in there. I do water changes on this weekly. I know some people will leave it 2 weeks, but I don't do monster water changes. So I'll only do about 30% of the volume. It might look like half of the tank when you see it fully drained, but I have got all the volume in the sump as well. So really, although half the display's empty, it's more or less a 30% water change on the whole system. But I do that weekly, and I think that contributes to the growth that I get in these African cichlids, because I've noticed when I've had sort of smaller fish, especially in this Mbuna tank, when I start doing regular water changes on it, I can really see the growth, especially in the Malawi hawks that I've got in that display now, because they weren't getting as regular water changes down in the cellar as what they are in the Mbuna display. And I can really see the growth. So, you know, a lot of people think that, you know, feeding your African cichlids and sort of blasting them with loads of food, feeding dead heavy, is how you get the quickest and best growth out of them. I mean, feeding them helps, but I don't actually feed my African cichlids a lot. And the reason I do that is because the reason I don't overfeed is because obviously you get all that food that ends up going into the water column, getting caught in your filtration and your sponges, and that contributes to nitrates in your water column. So I try to just control the feeding. I don't go over the top. I really think the water changes, because they're consistent week in, week out, is where I get the really good growth from these fish. Because when I do water tests and things like that, my nitrates are always zero, pretty much. Unless I go over a couple of days and I might get a little bit of a reading, but I have really good water quality in this tank. The only thing that is a little bit of a nightmare when I'm doing maintenance, and because I'm doing them water changes quite often, is that there's a bit of a pH swing. So I'm constantly having to, you know, add buffer into this tank just to try and keep the pH stable. So I go through quite a bit of that. It costs quite a bit of money to do it, but for the growth I get from the fish and, you know, the healthiness, the girth of them, it's worth doing. So I'll just dip that in there. I'm going to do a little bit of maintenance on the sump as well, because what I want to do is what I used to have was this spray bar that was let me see, I'll point the camera down so you can see into the sump. So I used to have this spray bar, which was, I used to have sat across the filter wall. And what that would do is it would spread the returning water evenly over that filter sponge. I've recently took it off to try and do a little bit of sound control because it's quite noisy. But all that's happening is all of the water's dropping at one end of the filter floss, and it's causing it to clog up at one end, and then none of this is getting used, but I'm starting to get an overflow in the sumps because it's clogging up. So I'm going to reintroduce this thing today. It's not dead noisy, but I had a bit of a moment with the sump where I did a lot of changes and sort of customizations to it, and I really got this because I took the moving bed filter out to get rid of the noise, and I really had this thing that I wanted it to be silent in here, but I'm not too fussed about that. So I'll add that back on, and then I'll get a little bit more out of the filter floss in the sump as well. I've already done the glass, and what I use is it's a wallpaper scraper. So if you've watched the videos, you'll see how effective this is. So what can happen sometimes is you can be looking at your tank and you can think that you've got cloudy water and your water quality is not that great. But what it actually is, a lot of the time, is a biofilm building up. So it's not as obvious as when you get sort of patches of algae on the glass. The biofilm it's just a layer all the way along it. And the thicker it gets, it makes the glass cloudy. So you might think you've got cloudy water, but in reality, what you actually need to do is get a scraper on the glass, because magnetic cleaners, sponges, they don't dig into it and get it up the same. So if you're using a sponge or a magnetic cleaner, yeah, it will take the algae off, but when you use the blade, you can really see it peeling that skin off of biofilm. Yeah, biofilm's good, but this is a mature tank. So I've got plenty of biological filtration in the sump, my biomedia, the rocks, loads of other places, the sand bed in this tank. I don't need to keep it on the glass. So I just take it off with that scraper and it gives it a really good, clear effect. I went through a bit of a lazy stage with this tank, which I'm pretty sure we've all been through when it's come to maintenance. You know, we have lazy days or weeks where we don't quite put the effort in that we usually do. And what I was doing, I was using a magnetic cleaner, and I hate the things, but it's dead easy to just give it a quick swipe and a quick clean and then crack on with any other jobs that I'm doing. It's just scratched my tank to pieces, and I knew it would. I've got all these little micro scratches up at the top because it catches the sand. It doesn't matter if you stay away and you're careful on that sand bed. Somehow, it always finds a way in between the magnet and ends up giving you a little scratch. So when I'm on certain angles on this tank, they're really visible and it's really bothering me. But there's not much you can do about it. Once it's scratched, it's scratched. You can't really get them out. Obviously, if you've got acrylic tanks, which not many of us, I've not seen many of in the UK anyway, don't use a scraper, not a metal one anyway. You have to use a ceramic one, because a metal one will scratch the plastic. And then always be careful when you're using a scraper around the silicon seam. So what I do is when I get to the edges and I'm sort of coming towards that silicon, I'll just put my finger over the top of the blade as a guard as I'm getting close to it, just so I can feel the silicon, and then I'll stop before I get there. Because if you nick it and you catch it with this razor blade, the more times you catch, it's not going to do it straight away and be catastrophic straight away, but the more times you nick it, you're weakening that bond on the silicon, and over time, that can then lead to a failure of your tank, a split seam, and it can, you know, contribute to the lifespan of your tank. So be really careful with blades if you're doing any scraping on it as well. Dan, you're here. Magic Eraser. Yeah, do you know what? I've never tried one of them. It's not a bad shout, to be honest. they've got a little bit more density than sponges, haven't they? So yeah, I can imagine them being pretty good. I'll have to try one of them. I think they'd be mint. Do you know what I think they'd be good for? Is cleaning the actual front panel of the glass as well. I reckon that'd give you a really good finish, just because of the density of it. I'm not a massive fan. I've tried it with sponges in this tank. I created a little contraption. I'll see if I can find it now. It's fucking ridiculous. Let me try and see if I've got it in here. I may well have chucked it in the bin, but what I did was I attached I had a piece of PVC plumbing, and then I wrapped a sponge around it, put some zip ties on the sponge, and then I was using that as like a big plunger to get in the tank, just to save myself a bit of time, so I didn't have to get the ladders out and start getting my hands in and my hands dirty. I was using it as like a plunger, and it doesn't matter how hard I was putting pressure on that sponge, it just wasn't really getting in deep, and it wasn't even taking some of the brown algae and the diatoms off it. So yeah, I'm not a massive fan of sponges, not when it comes to cleaning glass anyway. I don't, maybe on the outside, but where you've got that tough grime on the inside, it can become a little bit of a problem. How often do you do your water changes, Dan? Do you do them weekly, bi-weekly? I know some people, a lot of people do them every 2 weeks and just do a massive one. I'd probably do that myself, but the only reason I don't is because I get a little bit scared of doing a massive water change and then having that temperature drop, the temperature drop, because I don't fill this from the kitchen sink anymore. It comes from the garden tap. So as you can imagine, I can't really control much of the temperature on that. So when I'm flipping that garden tap on, especially this time of year, it's cold water. So I don't like to overdo it in case I shock the fish and drop the temperature a little bit too much. 50 a week, yeah, that's a good change. Have you always done it that way? Because I know I'd never used to do a 50%. I never used to do weekly water changes. I'd usually leave them, if I'm honest, 2, sometimes 3 weeks on older tanks before I actually did, a 50% change on it. I've only in the last sort of 2 years really been on top of it and doing it every week, and I've noticed a massive change in my fish and the growth and the coloration, the health of them, everything just from starting to get on top of that maintenance. Yeah, nitrates were climbing. It does happen quick in these African cichlid tanks. If you leave them too long, they do go a bit wild. Usually with nitrates, usually all right with up to 40 parts per million in the tank. But I don't know what it is with me. I think it's because I dabbled a lot in marine tanks for a while. And when it comes to marine tanks, when it comes to nitrates and nutrients in the water column, any reading is a bad reading. So even if I get sort of a little tiny bit of nitrates, instantly my brain thinks that's a bad thing. I need to get them out. It isn't necessarily with freshwater fish. Yeah, it's not great, but I probably can leave him a little bit long. You can get away with leaving it a little bit longer than you would in sort of a cichlid, a marine tank. But the problem you get is when them nitrates build up, it's not necessarily the fish that I worry about. Obviously, if they're at a dangerous level, then yeah, I'd worry about it. But it's not the fish that concern me. It's the fact that it feeds algae, and I hate algae in the tank. So that's why I like to have low nutrient levels in the system, is to avoid any algae blooms. Not having the lights on helps, but I think those water changes, it stops the glass getting as dirty as quick as well. I'm going to try that magic eraser, you know. I might have to get one of them and give that a whirl. Because I can imagine that you can get nice and close to these seams as well, which is the one thing that concerns me about the scraper. And after a while, they do start getting rust on them and stuff as well. So you have to change them over because you don't really want to be introducing rust into the water column. My sump's pretty sound as far as maintenance goes. So, I mean, I've recently done this sump and give it a complete sort of clean anyway. I've added more sponges. I've cut some new sponges to size on the mechanical bit. I've left old sponges in there, so I'm not losing all my biological benefits. And then I've added more biological media as well. I'm actually glad that I got rid of the moving bed filter, although it is a really good form of filtration, and it handles heavily stocked tanks quite well. It was creating a lot of mess in the main display because it's constantly bubbling up and churning, it's dragging all of that dirt and muck from the mechanical section, churning it up, putting it back into the return section and going back into the tank. So I've noticed a massive difference in the water clarity since I've taken that moving bed filter out, and it's a lot quieter in here as well. So I'm actually really glad that I did do that. It's not had really any sort of impact on my nutrient levels and things. It's managing it all well. I've had no ammonia or nitrite readings. So everything in here is mature. I mean, the additional biological media that I put in here, I took from the breeding sump downstairs anyway. So it's all mature stuff. So I wouldn't expect to have, you know, any sort of spikes in things like that anyway. And obviously you've got the sand. I've added new rocks. This lava rock should do a much better job of housing the beneficial bacteria than the Sirius stone did. But I've got a load of Sirius stone sat in a box now that is really a shame to waste because it's such nice stone. Let's see. I've got this this stuff that I used in the cichlid tank was the black lava rock. Now that was going to be for the paludarium, but what I actually did was order some of this red lava rock. So really cool stuff, exactly the same as this but a different colour. But I think that is gonna, you can see it, well, you might not be able to see it as good, but you can see how well that blends into that background. So I think once all that's built up as a back wall and I've got it built up as like a waterfall on the side there, I think that's going to look a lot better than the black lava rock would. Yeah, you have got to be careful with sort of sponges and erasers and stuff, haven't you? Because it depends on what sort of polymers they're made out of and stuff that can leach into the tank. I think, to be honest, a lot of it you might just get away with a quick clean while you're doing a water change as well, especially if you're running carbon and things like that. You'd probably be all right with a lot of it, providing it's not got any sort of antibacterial, anti-mold stuff that's riddled in it. But yeah, you've got to be careful, especially when it comes to using stuff in filtration. So, you know, if you're trying to get your sponge media on the cheap, that is a big risk, because if you don't know what sort of polymers that's made out of, it can leach all sorts of stuff into your water column over time if it's constantly sat in the water. So I always do buy aquarium grade sponges. The cheapest way to do it, I've found, even with canister filters, I mean, you can just cut them to the size of your canister filter anyway. But if you go into if you go into your local fish shop, you know, if it's a big place like, you know, Ripple's Water Life or Maidenhead Aquatics, just go straight to the pond section because it's so much cheaper than if you're going to buy it for sort of an indoor aquarium section when you're buying the ready cut shapes and the little blocks and stuff. Costs a bomb. If you go over to the pond section, get the pond sponges, you get massive big sheets, 10 quid, and you just cut it to size and stick it wherever you want it. So a little bit of a tip, if you're looking to save money on sponges, still go to your aquarium store, but go in the pond section. You can get exactly what you need. You don't need any finer sort of grade sponges than what's in that pond media anyway. It works exactly the same and it saves you a fortune. Right, that's more or less getting done now. So we'll be ready to start filling that up soon. I'm going to give it a little bit longer, let a bit more drain out. But it's like I said, I don't want to do too much and kill the temperature off on this tank. It's not worth the risk. To be honest, it's only been about 6 days since I last did a water change on it anyway. The only reason I'm doing it a little bit early is just to save myself a little bit of time. I've had a really busy week, so even, you know, I've made videos, but I've not finished editing them. So hence why I'm doing the live today. Just so obviously can buy a little bit more time to do some editing and stuff. But I think it's good to do the lives every now and then anyway. Just to sort of just because you can speak to it, we can speak to each other, can't we? So it makes a little bit more sense than just going in the comment section and doing it and ask questions as they come. This this paludarium build as well. Oh, Jesus. This is going to be it's going to be finished soon. I mean, one regret I had is I wish I'd have waited a little bit longer before I planted it, just because I'm getting a lot of, it's very hard to maintain the moisture on this back wall without having a tank underneath it as well. So I've got this felt on the top now, which you can see is absolutely sodden wet, which you have to keep taking outside and wringing out, because when I'm spraying this or when I've got the mist maker on it, the water's obviously got nowhere to go. So it's just dripping off onto this, which I'm having to keep wringing out. And I don't want to not water these plants because, you know, they're quite expensive to plant this entire wall. And I don't want them to die. So I think I just got a little bit giddy and a little bit excited and did it a bit too early. But the plants are doing really well, to be honest. They're doing a lot better than I thought they would. These air plants are great. They hardly require any maintenance. You know, they get a little bit of a light mist even without water. They hold the moisture in and stuff. The hardest thing to maintain on this currently is the live moss. So I'm getting a lot of die-off on some of this live moss that I bought, and some of the creeping figs as well, because it's quite airy substrate what I've used in the plants. So I don't think the creeping figs take in very well to it, because this is going to rain. It's got a full rain system at the top, but the sump and everything needs to be connected underneath to use the rain, because it's going to be to go into the tank and then it'll go into an overflow back into the sump. The tank is due this month. I am chasing them for a delivery date. I've not heard anything back from them for about a week, but I did sort of chuck some extra jobs on the tank, like asking for it to be painted and stuff, because the last thing I want to be doing with a 7-foot tank in this room is having to paint it or paint it outside, because obviously it's close to these other fish tanks and it'd just be an absolute pain in the arse to do it. So I did reluctantly pay for it to get painted, which might be what's taking it a little bit longer. But I'm ready for it to come now because I've built everything else. It's all ready to rumble. All I need to do is get the tank in. I'm going to drill the tank myself, which I'm a little bit worried about, just because it is a big, expensive tank. Now, I've drilled tanks myself a lot of times, but I can't remember what the thickness of the glass was on this. I think it might be 10mm glass, which is going to be a little bit more of a longer process to drill a hole in it. And it'd be a very expensive mistake to make. Usually when you do it, it's quite straightforward, but it's a daunting task. And it took me a long time of being in this hobby to gather the courage to actually do it at all. So doing it on that scale is a little bit concerning. And then I'll need to cut some holes out in the stand as well for the overflows. So this is going to be a really advanced system when it's built. So obviously we're going to have to build it so that the plants stay alive on the back. We're going to have to get lighting down into the tank underneath so that the plants in the tank grow. It's just about time now where these lights will turn off, and then I'll just have the moonlight in the middle, which looks pretty cool. So you'll get a chance to see that. But it's all controlled via the Amazon hub. So everything's on timers, the lights, the mister. So I've got a DIY mister down the side, which drops all the clouds inside here. So it's going to be a really cool system once the tank's in and we've got the water feature built and everything in there. It's going to look ace. So I'm excited to see that. Right, let's get this out. Changed a little bit more than I wanted to there because I've been waffling on and the siphon was still going. But I'm sure it'll be all right. Everything in here as well is quite, because I have this this drainage pipe which comes straight into this washroom, and then it goes through a gap in the door, slots straight through. So I'm not having to go, if I need to drain the tank, I can just plug it in. I'm not having to run with the door open and stuff. When I fill it up, I do, which kind of defeats the option a bit, but I try and make life as easy as I possibly can. I'll just move this and give you a nice view of the fish from above while I go and get the hose. African cichlids from above look ace, by the way. If you've never sort of seen a tank, a pond of these would look insane. So you can really get a good view of the colours, especially on the Rostratuses. The Rostratuses look amazing from above because they've got that a patchy metallic stripe along the top. But I'll go and get this hose ready. We'll get the return line plugged back in. And then I always just fill these up I fill it up from the sump, and then I just dial the return pump in, just so that it fills it up perfect. Right timing. Another great thing that I've did on this tank, which I've wished I'd have done a long time ago, was put these polycarbonate lids on, because they stop a lot of evaporation in the sump. Which means I'm not having to top the tank up as much and do annoying top pots halfway through the week. And not only that, it puts strain on the pump as well. When that water level gets too low and it's churning some air up, it's not getting fed the water the right way, then it puts a lot of pressure on it. So it's good just to not run that risk, if that makes sense. And then it doesn't actually take too long to fill up. There's quite a lot of pressure in that hose from the garden tap. So it's a very, water changes are actually relatively quick. I think because I've got all these little bits where it just runs through the wall and I can drain it dead easy. I've got the water change pump on there. And it makes it quite tidy as well. So I'm not making a lot of mess. I'm not using buckets. I'm not sucking siphons out and dragging things in and out of the house. The easier you make it and the less messy you make it, the more likely you are to do it on time. Because if it becomes an absolute chore, that's when you can start thinking, oh, do you know what? I'll just leave it tonight. I'll do it next week. And then I just give the front of the glass wet sponge. I don't put any soap on it. You can put soap and glass cleaner on the front, but just make sure that you apply it to the sponge first. Don't spray it on. Apply it to the sponge and then put it on the glass. Because if you spray it, you run a massive risk of contaminating your tank. And then that's going to be a very quick journey to the grave for your fish. Especially on smaller tanks. So, you know, if you've got smaller water volumes and you get you get something in that water column, it's a lot less forgiving than if you've got a big tank. You have a lot less time to do something about it. Well, this should look nice for the Cichlid Whisperer on Sunday. Got loads to show him. You know, I've built this. This setup has been in the making for a couple of years now. And it's finally, this room is something that I would never, it's something I've always dreamed of having. Is you know, a room where I've got to myself, where I can put a few different projects. Because when it comes to tanks, like, don't get me wrong, I do love my African cichlids, but I think stuff like this, where you can create a real Naturescape as well. I always have an itch to do that. The dirty tank downstairs, I'm going to do a video on that soon. I've done zero maintenance on it. I've not cleaned the algae. I've not done any water changes. There's no fish in it, so there's no livestock. I mean, if there were fish in it, I definitely would have, you know, done a water change on it, tested the water. It's got snails in, ram's horn snails, which have come out of nowhere. But that system is so interesting to watch. If you've never done a dirty tank, I highly recommend it because they're not labour intensive at all. They're very interesting and they're always changing. Like my plants are absolutely booming. That tank had an algae bloom about a week in where it looked like the algae was going to completely take over everything. So I wanted to intervene and try and get some of the algae out, but I didn't. I left it. And when I went back downstairs, you know, another week later, all that algae had died down, started to die off. The snails had started to consume it. So yeah, it's just really interesting how it is constantly changing. The plants are really blowing up. Some of the plants that you would label as a hardy plant, which don't need, you know, much care, are the plants that are actually struggling in that setup. So my Amazon swords are really sort of browning off, dying back. They're melting at the ends. But things like the crypts, some of the CO2 loving plants, the carpeting plants, the Liliopsis, they're all doing really well. So I'm going to do a video on that soon, a little sort of update video on that tank, and then potentially even introduce some livestock into it as well. Weirdly, the pH, although it's got that dirt base, which is a peat-based soil, although it's got that in there, the pH is actually quite high. So it's about 7.7, 7.8. Whereas you'd expect a tank like that to be in the low sevens, potentially even a 6, because it's got bogwood in it as well, which also lowers the pH. So yeah, it's a bit of a weird tank. I don't actually know what's going on with it. And I can't understand why the pH is so high, because it's not because it was had the African cichlids in, because I've drained that sump. But it's a cool tank. I'm really enjoying it. And what makes it good is because it's in the cellar, and I don't go in the cellar all that much. You can really notice the change in the tank. So when you've got, you know, a tank in your living room and stuff, and you're walking past it every day, you don't notice how much they change. Like I look back on some old videos of these fish, I think, oh my God, when I see them a few months ago, I then realise how much they've actually grown and how much bigger they've got. But because I'm walking past it every day, you don't notice it. So it's just having that in the cellar, you really notice all the differences, and it's a cool little project. Cichlid Whisperer is, I believe he is on YouTube, but I don't think he's started uploading any videos yet, Dan. I'll let you know as soon as he does, mate. I think he's making footage. He's on TikTok, so if you go on TikTok, he's got a good TikTok channel. He took a lot of inspiration from this tank to set up his own African cichlid display, where he's integrated marine equipment into the sump to keep the African cichlids, and it's a really cool tank, really nice looking one. So, and then he's gone to that aqua convention the other week, which sadly I couldn't get to. But yeah, his channel's amazing, so definitely get onto it on TikTok. But I'll give you a shout as soon as he starts uploading on YouTube as well. Yeah, someone else did say it could be the soil that's buffering it, because it's actually a pond substrate as well. So it could very well be that is affecting the pH in that tank. But I haven't really got any. What I don't want to do is I don't want to put additives into it, because, like I said, I want that tank to just sort of naturally develop. So I need something. I might get some of the what are they called, the botanicals. So like the leaves and the seed pods and stuff. I might just chuck a few of them in there at the back, and just let some of them tannins leach out into the water, and then hopefully I can get the pH down, because things like the botanicals and the bogwood and stuff, they're really good at doing that. Right, this is getting to a nice point now. I mean, it definitely looks nice and clean. Probably can't tell much difference on the camera, to be honest. Water's a little bit cloudy, but get some tap safe in. If you're doing water changes, I mean, if you've been in the hobby for a while, you'll know, but don't it's not the best practice to not use tap safe. You know, I see it all the time. Oh, I've never used dechlorinator. I've always used tap water and my fish are fine. Yeah, they might be. It's not going to kill them straight away. It's going to kill them over time, and it's going to do other things to them, and it's going to do stuff to the biology of your tank if you're leaving all them chlorines in your water column. So just because it don't kill them straight away doesn't mean that it's you know, that it's a good thing to be doing. You know, it's a long-term thing. You're using tap water on your fish over and over again. It affects the slime coat. It affects the bacteria in your tank. You know, there's loads of negatives to doing it. So you might not see the repercussions of it, you know, week 1, week 2, 4, 5, 50 weeks, you might be fine. But over the long term, it's doing damage to your fish. And some fish are really, you know, susceptible to it as well, especially things like discus and stuff like that that have really delicate slime coats. So you've just got to be, it's not expensive stuff. You can buy it in bulk. So just if you are doing water changes, make sure you're dechlorinating the water. Don't think you can get away with it. So what I do is it doesn't drop the temperature that much when I do the 30%. So I was saying this earlier in the video. What I do is I'll do the water changes weekly, but I'll do a 30% change, because what happens is when I turn the return pump off, all the water stays in the bottom of the sump, and the heater heats that up very quick. So the water that pumps back in from the sump is actually usually warmer than the tank water when it starts pumping back in. The temperature of the water outside is usually cold, so it does drop the tank temperature a few degrees, but I run my tank at 28-30 degrees anyway, so it usually picks up the temperature quite quick once I start introducing the water back into it. If I was to drain this and I would never do a 50% water change on it, because I think that'd be pushing it a little bit too far and getting a serious temperature drop on it. But just doing it the 30% how I do, it doesn't have an impact to a point where it's going to have a negative impact on the fish. I would prefer to run it from the tap, mind you, but it's a little bit easier to do it from the garden tap. But yeah, the temperature swing isn't that bad, to be honest, because I've got the sump underneath. Once it all mixes together and churns in, it works quite nicely. I've done it this way for a while as well, to be honest, and it's not. I've never crashed my tank to a bad point. But I just keep the changes down and do them a little bit more frequently, but take less volume out. Right, perfect. So I'm not going to give the sump a clean because, like I said, I've already recently done the sump, and you don't want to clean things like your sump and your canister filter too much. You know, it's good for them to have a little bit of muck in there. It's all good stuff. Unless it's causing a detriment to the tank itself and the functionality of your system, you don't want to be doing it. What I am going to do though is put some new filter floss in the sump, because this one's got clogged up and it is mucky. So it's really important to change this. Even with canister filters, change the filter floss if you're going to use it in a canister filter, but don't change your sponges, because this stuff gets clogged up and causes blockages, which is what it's doing on air, and it's causing some functionality issues inside the sump. So it's an absolute nightmare to cut to shape. You'd think it'd be dead easy looking at it, but it's not. You have to proper hack away at it. DMZ, what's it like using RO water? How do you do you have to put salts and buffer into the system? Because RO strips everything out, doesn't it? So I luckily my tap water is quite hard. But the pH is quite low, so I do have to dose for pH on my tap water. And I did think about using it because I have an RO system from when I had a marine tank, so I did think about using it on this. The only thing that put me off was the fact that it just strips absolutely everything from the water. But I can imagine your tanks look clean when you do a water change using that stuff. That's not my guinea pig running riot, by the way. It's my other half's, that one. 27 degrees is fine, Dan. Do you know what I do? Is sometimes I will play around with the temperature a little bit. I mean, I won't do any sudden swings, but sometimes I will dial it down, because what I've noticed is when I run the tank temperature at sort of 28, 30, which is primarily in summertime when it gets really hot and the tank sort of balances out to the ambient temperature. Because I don't have a cooling system on this tank, it tends to do all right because it was open top at the time and it's got the sump, so there's a lot of surface agitation on it. But when my tank is running at that higher temperature, I see a lot more aggression in the fish. So sometimes what I'll do is gradually, over a week or two, I'll dial down the temperature to about 25, 26, which some people might think is too low for African cichlids. But I've run in my old house, I constantly run this tank at about 25 degrees. And I had a really calm and chilled tank, because what it does is it slows the metabolism down a little bit. But what you do get is I did get a little bit of a colour drop off on some of the fish as well. But if you dial it down, the temperature a little bit, if you've got fish that are really kicking off and they're getting boisterous with each other, if you dial it down a couple of degrees over sort of 2-3 weeks, I've noticed that the aggression drops off, and they feed a lot less as well, so they're not as hungry as often. I mean, they'll still eat anything you put in the tank, but it really slows them down. And I've never sort of lost fish or anything from doing it, but occasionally I will if I see stuff kicking off in the tank. I had that issue quite recently. I've dialed the heater down a couple of weeks ago on this one, and a lot's calmed down in the tank. But I think that runs in line with me. You know, I've changed the hardscape and stuff as well, which can help with aggression. But they usually find spots fairly quick again and start dominating it. The RO, crushed coral subs. Yeah, crushed corals, man. I'm thinking of this. What I've got in here is the JBL riverbed sand. So what that does is it's similar. It's not as good as coral sand, but it is still. It does still react with the water column and buffer the pH. So it does similar thing to the coral sand, but I did think about I have thought about changing the substrate in here and introducing coral sand, or just dumping a load in, because I've got loads of it, crushed coral in the cellar from old marine setups. I only used a little bit in the Mbuna tank. I went off it for a little bit. I went off the aesthetics of it, because of how easily it was attracting algae in marine setups. But you don't run the lights the same and as powerful on an African cichlid setup, so it doesn't have the same, you know, the lighting doesn't have the same effect and sort of change its colour, because I absolutely love it again inside the Mbuna setup. Even with the Marco rock and the Texas Holy Rock, I really went off that as well and didn't like using that. But I'm a massive fan of the Mbuna setup. I love how that looks. Gives you that rocky beach look, and I have thought about replicating that in here, but what I don't want to happen is I don't want the tanks to look the same, if that makes sense. I like to have a little bit of difference between the two. But crushed coral, for people who don't use it, has an amazing impact on pH. I used that when I had the African cichlid breeding setup downstairs. I used that for that whole system, and it was I never had to add anything to that tank, even though I've got crap water. It was really good. Yeah, I'm. Whereabouts are you, Dan? Whereabouts in the UK are you from? Because I wish I had water like that here, mate. It's cost me a fortune in Buffer. The only thing I will say about this black sand DMZ is I don't know. I don't know if I'm imagining it, but I think it has like magnetic properties. Because if I've ever dropped like a wave maker in here, or I've dropped the glass cleaner, the sand really sticks to it. So I don't know if it's got like iron in it or something like that. So if you've got magnetic cleans and stuff, that's why I've got scratches on my glass, I think. But it's cool, it's good, and it's good at hiding. It's good at hiding fish crap. So you can't. It's not as visible when you get them piles of fish poo on the sandbed. It's really good at hiding that. I mean, I like the aesthetics of this tank. I like how it looks. It's. I think it look. I prefer the darker substrate with the peacocks, I think, and the harps, and the black background, because I think you get a real. The thing is with this, right? The way I look at it is with African cichlids. You've got your planted tanks and your tetras and things like that, and then you've got your African cichlids. African cichlids, I think the fish are the showpiece. So the fish are the showpiece of the tank when it comes to mboonas, peacocks, haps. That's what you focus on. So that's how I try and design the tanks, is to make it so that the fish pop, not the actual display. Whereas when it comes to things like planted tanks, and these naturescapes where you have got your smaller tetras and things like that, I think the focus with those tanks is on the actual scape and the nature aspect of it, and feeling like you're looking into a pond or a riverbed and stuff like that. That's why I like to dabble in both sides, because I've got an appreciation for both different types of tanks. What I love about African cichlids is going out and looking for that perfect fish, that showpiece trophy fish, and the characters of them and the hierarchies and stuff that they build in the tanks, the colour pop. I love that aspect of it. But then when it comes to planted stuff, I like to be really intricate with all the details and the plants and the scape, and make it look as much like a real slice of nature as I possibly can. So they're two completely different types of fish keeping in my eyes, and what you focus on. But yeah, I love the scape in that tank. It's cool. Yeah, to be honest, DMZ, I think having the coral sand. If I could go back now and change it, and start this tank with coral sand, I'll be perfectly honest with you, I probably would, just because of the buffering properties you get from it. So yeah, I think even though you couldn't find the black stuff, I think you've probably come out better at the end of that, because it's like I said, I'm constantly having to put buffer into this tank, which I don't like doing. I don't like adding things like that into the tank, but I've seen, since I've been really dialing in the pH with the pH controller and stuff on this setup, I've seen a lot of progress in coloration, size, growth. I've still got my female fish in here, which is constantly holding, and the poor thing spits, and then the haps just annihilate all the babies. But I really don't want to part with this fish. This is one of the first fish that went in this tank, and it was a juiced fish. So if you saw this fish when I got it, in comparison to what it looks like now, you would not believe that it is the same fish. It's absolutely wild. So I only found out it was female when it started spitting eggs. I thought it just coloured down because it was a sub-dom. But I don't want to part with it, because it was the original fish in the tank. But it doesn't cause any aggression just being the only female in here. It doesn't cause any sort of imbalance with the peacocks and stuff. So that's the only reason I've left it. Yeah, I do think the black makes the colours pop, to be honest. But I think white can do a similar thing. Yeah, I mean, this is the problem when you have females is you know, having somewhere to put them babies, then them babies growing out. This is, I learned early on not only to keep a male only tank for aggression control, but for that reason, because you just end up with loads of babies. They breed like mad. These aren't hard fish to breed, so there's no real technique to breeding them. You just put males and females in a tank. It doesn't even matter if they're the same species; they'll still breed with one another. So it's yeah, it can be a little bit of a nightmare to control because what happens is when that fish spits and you've got the fry, you reintroduce the fish back into your tank. Unless you've got separate tanks, you reintroduce that female back into the display, and then it'll be spitting again before your fry have even got anywhere. So it can be an absolute headache. Yeah, I wouldn't mind some Acaras, you know. I wouldn't mind them in this in the paludarium display, or some Apistogrammas or something as well. I might even get some cribs in there because I love cribs. Really easy fish to look after, and they breed really well as well. The sump on this, I've actually let's just point it down a bit. I'm going to use the yeah, man, nice one. I'll give you a shout if I'm after any. I'll be a while before this tank setup, but I'll definitely give you a shout. These tanks down here, these are what were on the breeding rack. So these were going to be the baby tanks for the peacock and hat breeding, which I decided to knock on the head because I had that. If you've watched my old videos, go and watch the night vision video, because I was trying to breed the Malawi eye biters. My male Malawi eye biter went absolutely rogue. It killed everything that I put in the tank, all the females, which has been living with for years. It killed them all, and I tried to reintroduce that male back into this display, and it ended up killing my Fusco, which I'd had for a long time, was a really nice fish. So it really put me off the whole breeding project, which is why I decided to tear it down, because I ended up with a fish that I had to rehome, which it was just a nightmare. You know, I had to put those females into quarantine tanks to heal back before I could reintroduce them back into here. And then two of them it just killed. So it put me off. So I've decided to use these as what will be the next DIY sump build. So I'm going to use these breeder tanks to do a DIY sump on this system, which will be a little bit more robust than the storage box one. So I'm excited to make that video. This will be a cool build. I'll obviously be drilling it all myself, and this is what's going to feed the range system and everything up top, which I'm a little bit worried about because I've built it. I can't test it, so I need to dial that in, and I'm scared if it's going to work or not, because I'm really praying and hoping that that range system's a successful build and it works. Otherwise, I'll be really upset because I absolutely hate these. At the moment, these plants have got a mister on them, and it's this monsoon multi, this reptile one. I hate it. It's absolutely crap. So if you're thinking of getting a mister, I'd probably go out and get one of the proper industrial ones. Don't get me wrong, if you've got a little terrarium, you know, a small glass terrarium, these would probably be great. But on a system this size, on this scale, I think because you're having to stretch those lines all the way along a 7-foot length and 9 feet high up over the top, it kills all the pressure off, and they really don't work well watering these systems. It gives it a little bit of a spray, but I can't add any more nozzles on because the pressure just dies off. So I need to, I cannot wait to get rid of that and have the range system on there just doing it for me. Yeah, the Strigatus. Do you know what, mate? over time, I've actually grown to prefer that fish. So the Strigatus in this tank is a much more colourful fish than that male eye biter ever was. When I put that male eye biter downstairs, it blew up. It had loads of colour on it. But the Strigatus in this tank is absolute fire. It's all its dorsal fins are fluorescent orange. It's got a much, they are known for being aggressive, so you probably still can have a bad one, but this seems to have a much better temperament than any of the eye biters I've ever had have. It seems to be a lot more chilled. It's still one of the more aggressive fish in the tank, but in comparison to some eye biters, the trick with eye biters is to make sure when you get them that you've already got a dominant fish in the tank. So make sure that they're not the biggest fish in the tank, basically. Because as soon as they become the dominant fish, and if they're bigger than all your other fish, they're going to cause an absolute riot inside your tank. They can get really nasty, really boisterous, and they're very predatory fish as well. Yeah, they are really similar. I mean, to be honest with you, I've had a lot of eye biters in tanks over the years, and I couldn't actually tell that that wasn't an eye biter until I got an actual eye biter in the tank and I could see them side by side. So I did get this one quite small. So I thought, obviously, when you get a smaller eye biter, you think it's going to sort of grow more into that shape. But when I actually got the real ones, and as soon as I saw them side by side, I thought, this is a little bit off. It looks like a hybrid or something. But they're actually from the same family. They're just sort of different branches. Yeah, some of them can be all right, Dan. You know, I've had some in the past that have been really chilled fish, and I think when you've got other haps in the tank as well, they can be even more timid. But when I first got that one, the one that went rogue, when I first bought that fish and put it in this tank, it coloured down. It sort of become a subdominant fish, and it wasn't bothering any of the fish in it, and my Strigatus was actually dominating it and holding its place in the tank. It was only when I took it out of this display, took it downstairs to breed, and I put just the females in the tank with it, it sort of burst into colour, got really aggressive, and then when I put it back in this tank, it was just pinning everything to one side of the tank, just going absolutely ballistic. It's just a classic African cichlid thing. They can just switch. You just flip a switch in them and they can just start killing everything. It can happen with any of them. The peacocks, blue dolphins, they can just start go rogue one day and start destroying everything. Was that a dog? No, it's a guinea pig. It runs rogue around the house. I don't know where it is now. I have to watch it because it goes under the actual tank, and I can hear it nibbling stuff. So I don't want it to bite through a wire. Not only because it'll destroy my stuff, but it'll get absolutely barbecued if it chews through one of them. I think it might have. I think it might have gone back in its room now. Listen, right, this isn't my decision to have guinea pigs running rogue around this room. What it is my missus has these guinea pigs, and if she has them and I don't say anything, then she can't say anything about this. So just keep it sweet, let her have them, let them run round and do what they want, and then I don't get any earache when I go out and buy any fish tanks. The best way to do it. Right, I think we're going to wrap it up there, boys and girls. Get the doors back on this. When Cichlid Whisperer comes round and films this tank, I'll obviously give you a heads up because we're going to do a full tour around all the displays, how they work, the cellar, the sump, the filtration, everything. So I'll give everyone a heads up when that video drops. Everyone on my channel, I'm sure if you go and follow him on TikTok, he'll give you a notification when he's dropping it himself on there. But yeah, tank's nice and clean. Maintenance done for the week. I did the Mbuna display 2 days ago, so I sort of try and I don't do them all at once usually. I'll split the tanks up so it doesn't take a full day off me. But that's looking nice and clean now. Showroom ready. So yeah, if you're watching the live, thanks for tuning in. And then should have a video dropping next week. So keep an eye out for that.